This video is sponsored by me. That's right. The weekend retreat is happening again this year from the 11th to the 13th of July. And you don't want to miss it because this year we're studying Ecclesiastes. That's right. The book that I haven't been able to stop talking about or thinking about for the last 5 years. We're putting aside a whole weekend to look at it. So email lambda.retreats@gmail.com if you're interested. It's from the 11th to the 13th of July. Whether you're a deeply committed Christian and you have been for years and you want a based environment to have those honest conversations, or maybe you're an atheist, but there's been some part of you been saying, I should give God a chance, or perhaps you're just feeling lonely and isolated in the modern world. Either way, email lambda.retreats@gmail.com and come and join us. I've invited some of the sharpest minds of the internet to compete in a competition of intellect, cunning, and taste. Welcome, Ferro. Phone's off. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Do you accept the challenge?
I accept the challenge. Also, I'm not the sharpest mind. I am blunt but powerful, like Hercules' club.
Right. You're gonna take this on through pure force, through
mass.
Muscle.
Yeah. Exactly, just through mass. Yeah.
Let me explain the format. You are this knight, and you've been deposited on Gauntlet Island, which is full of all kinds of beasts and challenges. And if you explore to the outer edges, gold. And this is how knights prove themselves. We're going to test your mettle through a mixture of discussions and questions and things. The idea is that you pick which path you want to go down, and the further you go, the more gold you can put in your pouch. But if you die to any of the monsters at any point, you will lose all the gold in your pouch and have to return to Lambda's Landing. So you can turn back whenever you like and deposit the gold from your pouch into the treasury. And your score is however much gold is in the treasury at the end of the session. Are you clear?
Yes. How long is it? Based on time, or is it based on turns?
It's time, so it's about an hour.
Okay.
But
fine.
if you, the length of the discussion is a little bit elastic. But I figure if the discussion goes on for longer, you've got more chance of defeating the monster. So it's not necessarily just how quickly you can move around. And also the amount of gold that you get slightly goes up with a long discussion. So fine. I've tried to balance it, I tried to make the format not too abusable. I didn't want the guests saying, we're going to have a boring stream, but I'm going to win the competition.
I see. Okay. I've got another question. Am I a gnome, and do I have any racial traits for being a gnome?
Well, you're in this suit of armor. I guess if you've brought a character sheet, then let's say you are a gnome underneath, and maybe that gives you a +1 against water. What are gnomes known for? I think
it's like engineering. Like, they're not really good warriors, if I'm honest with you. So
yeah,
really okay.
Okay. I'll allow you to be a gnome, but it will be negative on all of your stats. So,
yeah, that's fine. I like a challenge. The thing is, I'm a romantic gnome warrior. Everyone said that he should not become a warrior, but he did. So he's an idealist. I like it.
Well, we're about to find out whether everybody's preconception about gnomes is wrong. And your first decision is which path to take out from Lambda's Landing. So you can go to the Dunes of Dishonesty, and that's for questions relating to culture. You could go to the Biased Bridge, and that's for questions around society. You could head to the East Crossroads for questions to do with knowledge, or you can journey to the Standing Stones, and that's for topics around ethics. You'll probably get the chance to come back and go a different route later in the session.
Well, I think I'm going to go easily with a nice culture chat.
I thought you might. So Dunes of Dishonesty is your first destination. Watch as the little knight starts out on his path. Look at that.
This is amazing, by the way. This is quality production.
You wouldn't believe how much time I sunk into making this. On your path, you've encountered the Savage Shifter. By the way, credit goes to Poe the person, for providing all of the hand-drawn artwork here. Do go and patronize Poe if you're in need of artwork, or patronize her if you're feeling superior. Bones crack and reform as the human before you transforms under moonlight, twisting into a savage werewolf with jaws that can crush steel. So your question from the Savage Shifter is globalization positive? So you give me your take on this. I'll score you according to a dozen or so metrics secretly, and then we'll roll some dice and see if you've defeated the Savage Shifter.
Okay, also, can I just, before we get into it, I just like the idea of, you're just seeing this man transform from human into lycanthropic beast, and he just turns around and he's about to strike, and then he just says, "Is globalization positive?"
Yes, is that your impression of me? Is that the voice that you imagine?
No, this is the Savage Shifter. This is the Savage. Is he asking the questions? Is that the idea, or is it like
he I guess, yeah. There's certain parts of there's, I guess, what some people might refer to as ludonarrative dissonance. the things that you're doing as a player don't necessarily match up with the lore and the imaginative fantasy that we're living.
Okay, maybe the island has like words are, I don't know, words powerful. Anyway, let's do the thing before we.
Well, what I think of it as is the as the battle is about to happen, the world freezes and you have like a flashback moment to your training when you were discussing all kinds of high-minded literature with your Yoda-like, teacher
also a gnome.
Up on the mountain.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
another gnome. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do this.
So tell me, is globalization positive?
Okay. We're starting now.
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting question. Something that's a hot topic right now. I think we got to, again, it's about the positive question in my mind, and then I think I don't want to waste away in semantics too much, but I would firstly define globalization as external forces to the nation, and then I'm going to say positive, having a positive impact in people's lives. Now, again, I think with this kind of positive impact, I think there's different layers, aren't there? What do you want for your citizens, either individually or nationally? I always think about Ruskin, of course, when he talks about, I'm going to be
when I had Dave, when I had Distributor on, I gave him one token to mention Chesterton at some point, and I'm giving you the same rule for Ruskin.
Oh no!
You can bring up Ruskin's ideas as long as you don't name him.
No, okay, fine. But
you get this one though.
Yeah, he talks about what should be the purpose of leadership of a nation, and he says it should be for the health, happiness, and the virtue of the nation. And I would like to use those 3 points to think about this kind of positive angle. Does globalization make a nation healthier? I think you could argue that there is a positive angle from pharmaceutical. If you think about drug manufacturing, etc., probably lowers down the costs. But conversely, I would also say think about the diseases and obviously
did the Native Americans think of globalization as positive as the Europeans arrived?
But also, for example, like tuberculosis has made a big comeback in specific parts of the country. I don't know if yes, in Birmingham and London, because of certain forms of immigration, and also as part of that, the culture of not vaccinating children and caring about or going to the doctors. So basic diseases that which we thought we'd won against have come back because of it. Let's think about the happiness for a second. Again, there are obviously lots of kind of cultural imports. Think about your American slop. You know, it does think like our nation is just so happy for all of the slop it gets. You know, we're just like little greedy little piggies, just sucking down our American Netflix shows. You know, so
yes,
I think it certainly makes us happier. Although it's interesting, is like it's kind of like a form of deranged happiness. I think something like Netflix, where we probably consume content more than ever, but we're also never sated. I don't know. I always feel like after watching a TV series that I'm, what do I watch next, etc. While I wonder if people of the past had the same kind of attitude to that.
But possibly, although I think of like my sister's attitude to books. She's never sated with reading. Finishes one book, straight on to the next.
Yeah, she's a nerd though. She literally can't be helped. Unhelpable. In terms of other happiness, I was thinking. In fact, one of the downsides is that feeling of homogeneity, and again, I think obviously that's a big issue in today's society. I think people definitely, you know, this idea of the UK, something that Drupa and Morgoth talks about, this kind of new globalized Britain face, which has kind of it's kind of like a simulacrum of Britain, because it speaks some of the language, it has this kind of like elements of it, but it's kind of mutated beyond what it originally was. So for example, your kind of infinite vape shops on the high street, Turkish barbers, etc. And again, I think that is exceptionally depressing with people and making them very unhappy, and they can feel that actually that's not part of who they are and where they come from at the same time.
For the definitive Morgoth expression of his thoughts on the UK, I refer listeners to Morgoth's appearance on the Gauntlet on this same channel.
Okay, I'll need to check it out.
At the time of recording, it's not yet been published, but at the time of listeners listening to this episode, it has.
The thing is, Lee, that a lot of people will be skipping ahead to the best episode. That's I'm just kind of explaining.
All I'm saying is put it in your watch later right now. It's probably in the recommended tab.
Exactly. But then let's talk about virtue as well. And I think what I think the original Labour movement attempted to do was to focus, because again they were very much into Ruskin, unsurprisingly. If you see the top three influences for early Labour MPs, it's the Bible, it's Carlyle, and it's Ruskin. And interestingly, though, they took the health and the happiness element of Ruskin's triad, but then they didn't really focus on the virtue so much. And I think especially by the turn of the century, the virtuous element wasn't of an interest in the new age of scientism, basically.
Yeah. I was just thinking about that today people are very interested in health and happiness, and they're interested in virtue signaling. They want to have other people think of them as virtuous by posting things. They're not very interested in being self-sacrificial and doing things to.
Also, it's a skin deep virtue. Also, I think this is something interesting as health as God as well, or again health as virtue, as opposed to like part. Like I think it is important to have a healthy body and a healthy mind, and I think it's obvious, for example, if you read the Bible with its allusions to the runner and the race, as part of that. We have a little game in our family on our drive to church on Sunday to spot people jogging on a Sunday as we go to church.
Oh, yeah.
And all the kids, my little boy just says, "I see joggers," the cutest thing. But I would say we see about 30 joggers on the way to church. It's only about a 20-minute drive, so it's literally more than one jogger a minute, I swear. But it's interesting that the church hole has been replaced by the jogging hole. But
so these people don't then show up 5 minutes after the beginning of the service, sweating. I can't believe my car broke down, but I had to try and get to church as quickly as possible.
Well, maybe that's it. Maybe what we need to do is to combine like the gym and the church at the same time. You know,
I have thought about starting a men's group which is based in a gym. Sorry, carry on.
Gains for God.
Nice.
There we go. That's the name. That's the branding.
Strong.
And then also you could have different themed like gym items. For example, like Samson with his pillars. You got to push the pillars down.
Yeah. Samson's Saints.
Anyway, going back to the Labour point, it's interesting how virtue has been got dropped off, but again was obviously, as Ruskin being a mega evangelist, I would describe him as very very Christian, way more than Carlyle. He was very keen on the moral state and the virtuous state of the nation, and I think what's interesting about virtue is that humans have a natural tendency not to be virtuous, is my experience, or not wanting to make the effort to do it. So it's interesting. It's sort of an anti-democratic feature, because you know what I'm saying, for most people, I would say on average. So yes, just looping back to globalization again, I think it's been a big negative on the virtue side, and I think a lot of our ills have been taken from other countries. For example, I think most of our approaches to sex and relationships have been taken from Americans after the 50s, and we were still kind of quite like tight up in the 40s still, while the Americans were very loose, I would say, in comparison. So I think it's been a big net negative on the virtue side. So I'm going to say overall globalization is a negative, because while I think it makes us a little bit more happy and a little bit more healthy, it kills the virtue of the nation.
There's been a lot of discourse recently about the tariffs, and the libertarians, of course, have been screaming about how much poorer the tariffs are going to make America. As in,
don't care. I'm super pro tariffs. Just like I don't care about GDP. I would rather.
Well, that's what I was about to comment. Was that when we receive the goods, the services that we trade, we become materially richer. Should we think of that as being slightly poisoned by the influence that comes from? So, is globalization positive? If your country is if its starting point is that it is a morally bankrupt backwater, if it is a sort of demonic sort of pit, then the influence of other countries might be positive morally. But if you believe that your country is starting as a relatively Christian, moral, upstanding place, and the input of sort of trade is coming from parts of the world that you consider to be like
less
virtuous, then the inevitable result is that you will lose some of your virtue.
I think there's a definite truth to that.
So it's positive for America and negative for Britain, then, is that what
well, exactly. Just on
jumping on the let's dunk on Americans, which is fashionable right now.
Exactly. But just on the tariffs, I think it's interesting because, again, like one of my big issues with a lot of today's society is, as part of a technocratic regime, is the need to turn all of our life experiences into quantitative numbers. And again, something like health. My mother used to be a nurse and lived through the Blairite managerial phase, where again they put waiting lists in place. They put loads of other things to try and quantize healthcare. And the problem is like health, like quality of care doesn't really work like that. It's kind of like it's more experiential. It's different for every single person, and I think that's one of the problems with globalization is the need to rely on numbers, and the fact that numbers aren't good for health, they aren't good for happiness, and they aren't good for virtue. Because again, then you just sort of default to GDP. It's like, oh, we've got more stuff, so we're better, aren't we? We've got more things. We're consuming more things than ever before. Like we've got the cheapest TVs we've ever had before. Aren't we healthier? Aren't we happier? And that's just obviously not true. Everyone's flipping miserable, and we're, morally bankrupt as a nation.
Good. Well, I think it's time to fight the monster. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Ready for battle?
Please. Let's roll those dice.
Okay.
-10 modifier for being a gnome.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, let me put that in. Okay, here we go. Determining outcome. My GPU is spinning up as it calculates. Victory!
Oh, brilliant. How does that work, though? Because my combined score is lower than the monster strength.
Yeah, but it's all probabilities, so it's not clear based on the stats. The outcome is not deterministic in that sense.
Based, it's not numbers based. That's what we're talking about here.
It's very much not numbers.
It's the heart. It's the little heart of the gnome. Once again,
has triumphed.
I'm bringing you on a journey. I'm bringing everyone on a journey here. You see.
Good. All right. So back to the map, and I think that means you're going to be able to successfully reach the dunes of dishonesty. Here he goes. Good. And let's bring up your actions again. So that gives you 3 options. You can either head back to Lambda's Landing to stick those 20 gold straight in the treasury, bank it, as if we were playing the weakest link, or you can carry on to Benevolence Bay for questions to do with expression, or to the West Crossroads for questions to do with storytelling.
Well, I think the Crossroads is the place to go. I hear the chat's really good. Yeah.
All right. So you travel towards the Crossroads. What do you think the chances are that something leaps out at you?
I think it's going to be high.
Uh-oh. A naiad. The tree's bark splits to reveal a woman-shaped being who steps forth, her skin textured like wood and leaves sprouting from her hair.
Hold on a second, mate, because what you're referring to there is like a wood nymph, but she's in the water, so she's obviously a water nymph, so it's classic.
Well, I'll admit, I gave Poe a list of about 40 things to draw, and she was like, I don't have time for this. So I had to sort of I had to use the images for a few different sort of enemies each. So let's do this. Can fiction teach more effectively than fact?
That is a good question. I presume, again, let's do a quick semantic definition again. So again, we're talking in the realm of storytelling. So we're talking books here. Can fictional works teach more effectively than fact? Yes. Okay. And then I think an interesting word is effectively. I'm going to say something that's effective if people take away the correct message from that work. I mean, that even in itself is interesting, because do factual works have a purpose? Now, there's a very famous philosopher whose name I will not mention, it's because and he had a series of lectures on the uses of art, and also
let the reader understand the philosopher in question.
I mean, the big R. I won't say anymore.
Yes.
And he basically said his thoughts on it were that there are sort of different levels to the purpose of art. There is a utilitarian, a moral, a spiritual, and a transcendent level. So, for example, a TFL poster telling you to hold onto a side rail is a piece of art, because it's a poster with a nice picture on it, but its purpose is purely utilitarian and functional. Like, if you had a transcendent experience from reading that poster, you would be a little bit weird. And again, that's not its purpose. Now, here's something interesting, because do factual works ever sort of exist outside of the utilitarian plane? For example, I'm taking my daughter through a book on the periodic table. Can you ever have a transcendent moment from reading the periodic table? I think the child. Maybe you kind of be amazed at wonder at the universe or something like that. But is fact by its nature tethered to the physical plane, because it has to exist in reality? I'm just trying to think of an example of something factual. Maybe would you count a history as fact? I guess, like a Tacitus, or even is the Bible factual?
You've taken what started as a difficult question and you've just made it 3 steps more difficult.
It's just an interesting question.
It's very interesting. Is the Bible fact or fiction? I mean, the trite answer would be to say it's fact. In fact, I guess you could look at this question like any sentence that is true is fact. So then you could have some quite abstract factual statements. You could say God is love is a fact, and therefore fiction is anything true. That is a sentence that evaluates to false, strictly evaluated against our universe. So it could be like Postman Pat, I don't know, is 100 years old. No, even inside the Postman Pat universe, that's probably not true.
He's 1,000 years old. Never changes. He never changes. This is some deep lore we're getting into right now. Actually, Jess the cat is his familiar, and he's sharded some of his soul in that cat. That's why he cares about it.
Is Postman Pat actually it's a sort of werewolf movie where he's been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, all the other characters changed. Look at the original series versus the series nowadays on TV. All the characters are different. What's up with that? The eternal postman.
Except for Pat.
Except for Pat.
Right, but in the case of the case of the value of fiction being that so not to become too Petersonian here, but if you look at real life, you notice patterns. You notice something happening over and over again. Perhaps over generations, you can find an even deeper pattern that is more true. And then if you were to tell a story that was an encapsulation of the pattern, the story is going to involve individual characters. And on one level, the story, as you receive it, is fiction. But because it's more precise to the pattern, it hones in. It's more valuable to the people who receive the story, because rather than being tied to the arbitrary things that happened to one person, it's instead a kind of an amalgamation of the lives of thousands or millions of people over hundreds of years.
I mean, I don't think I necessarily buy into that. I would say that the majority of factual books do really focus on quite banal things. Like, I think maybe the exception being histories and like, again, you could say the Bible is a kind of history, really, isn't it? That's why. And then you can kind of evaluate people's lives. So I think it's restricted in teaching part of this. I think it's good at doing one thing very well, which is this utilitarian plane. While I think the virtual and the moral fiction really benefits from that. Just one example of that. Why was Jesus so obsessed with telling stories in parables? Again, obviously, he tells us part of it is to make some people understand and to make some people not understand intentionally, which I quite like. I think the obscuration of truth. But then when you explain the parable, then it becomes very obvious. Like, I always thought, like, how stupid people of the past must have been to not understand some of these things. It's very obvious what they mean. But that's from the position of having that explained to us already, or having heard it several times as a Sunday school teacher, as opposed to hearing it for the very first time, totally decontextualized. So that was, I think, my first point is that the factual books can only fundamentally teach certain aspects of life very well at all. So I think fiction already has an advantage over that. I think going back to the effectiveness, I think that fiction is more typically more readable. It is more read. However, counter to that, there is just so much more slop. And again, if you think about the novel itself has been just so unbelievably debased as a literary form right now, where again it's gone from, again, novel in itself, this kind of small little new thing that sprung up into this huge, massive industry churning out low quality, ghost written nonsense to kind of feed, I don't know, some kind of desperate need for something from various people. So I think that is the disadvantage from fiction. It's kind of like it often can, in some ways, its appeal is so strong that you don't actually have to have any content in it whatsoever, like mentally, and people will still like read it. So what I'm gonna say is that fact performs best in the world, in the physical plane. Fiction, it operates in the world of the transcendent and the virtuous and the moral. Again, think of the great stories of England, like Robin Hood or King Arthur. Yes, they are interesting moments of fiction, but they're also ripe with morality. Think about like the Greek tragedy or the Shakespeare tragedy and comedy. All of those kind of fictional works filled with vignettes and set pieces that you're able to set up. And I think that's the disadvantage that fact has, is that you're tethered to reality itself and things worked out in a specific way, while with fiction it's down to the ties of imagination, which are boundless. And also they let you focus on things that may not have been in the past or may never be again, or things that might have been lost as well. So I'm leaning more on the fiction side, although you can talk about the different types of lessons to be learned, or the things what are you teaching is what I'm trying to get to as part of the question itself, if that makes sense.
Yes. So there are things that are best taught through fiction, and there are other things that are best taught through fact.
Yes, I think so.
Well, do you know do you know how I know that's such a strong answer? Is because it's different from what anybody else has said when faced with this question, and I'm completely convinced you've sold me on this. I think you've come up with the definitive take on this question.
Well,
let's find out if that means that you've defeated the Naiad.
Ooh, let's have a look.
Can you feel the tension?
I can do. It's very close. Combined scores. Oh yes. Although I'm a little bit sad. I was hoping that she would take me with her and drown me.
Yeah. Good. Back to the map then. Okay, good. You've made it to the West Crossroads, which means you have the option to go back. You've got 106 gold in your pouch. That is, at risk unless you bring it back to Lambda's Landing. But if you dare to go on, who knows the bounties that may befall you at the Charisma Chasm for questions relating to tradition, or to Tautology Tower to discuss film.
I mean, I'm definitely going to go for the Charisma Chasm. That's actually my wife's nickname for me as well, by the way. So,
Good. Okay, so on the pathway to Charisma Chasm, you hit a Cam-Azots, which I guess is some sort of a bat creature. Chittering Cloud descends.
From?
I think I was Googling around for like mythical beasts.
That's cool. This is great. I've never heard of this before. I thought I was well versed on mythological creatures. So
let me do a quick bit of research, because I like to think of these streams as being informative for people. A Cam-Azots is a figure in Maya mythology. So I think we'll let you off for not knowing about the Popal Ver. I think is the subset of the Maya. A bat-like monster associated with the underworld of the Chibalaba. The name translates to death bat in the Kichi language.
There we go.
So the death bat descends, and the death bats whisper into your ear, "Can traditions be revived authentically?"
I mean, that was a great sound effect. Have you considered a career as a Foley artist? Just get this, be like, yeah, but just check out my bats. Check out my.
Should I do noises for all of the rest of the monsters that we
should do? You
should have heard. You should have heard my Nymph voice. It's too late now. So, suppose you learn about a tradition that was not so long ago living tradition in the place that you live.
Yes.
With your ancestors even, right? But the chain has been broken. There's nobody left alive who embodies the tradition, but you think it would be great to bring it back. But is it authentic? Is there any purpose or benefit in trying to do that kind of thing?
Okay, I'm just going to define some of these bits here a second. I think this is
like playing the Gauntlet with a first-year philosophy student,
or Thomas Hobbes. You gotta get your little definition. It's more what it is. It's more how my brain works. I'm starting to think through this a little bit more in depth.
No, I know exactly how your brain works. You're going through the bookcase in your mind of Ruskin ideas, and you're thinking of how any of them can be connected to these ideas.
Ruskin doesn't really talk about. I mean, he does have some interesting stuff about. We'll go into it in a second. I think this authentic thing is what's of interest to me, because I think we could have a big argument about what is it to be authentic? Does it even matter at the same time? But I do want to talk about traditions and revivals first, because I think that's in my mind, more like, I think a lot of people are kind of pent up on authenticity these days.
Okay. So you're happy with the word can and be?
I am, yeah, and traditions and revived. It's just more like,
okay,
like it's just more like trying to understand, like, does authenticity in itself have any like real meaning or purpose? Like, is it? Do you know what I'm saying?
I do know. Yes, sorry, carry on.
But let's just talk about the revival and the traditions, because there's a couple of interesting cases. And I actually did a big talk at the Witten a couple of years ago, looking at a couple of cases where different cultures went about basically doing this very same process.
Wow!
And I'll give you two examples. One was the Byzantine Book of Ceremonies. So obviously the Byzantine Empire, the kind of inheritors of Rome / they are Roman. I'm not getting into that argument.
Yeah.
Basically, after the Muslim invasions, they suffered quite badly in terms of their territorial losses. They were very fractured, and so there was an attempt to try and find a new homogeneity, and as part of that, it was cultural, but also through traditions at the same time. And one of the emperors, I can't remember his name right now, I'm sorry, created this book called The Book of Ceremonies. You should check it out. And it's basically kind of like a royal book listing out every single ceremony and festival in the Byzantine kingdom at that time. And as part of the process to generate this book, he went out and sort of collected up and hoovered up a whole load of older traditions that were still being celebrated. So, for example, if you've ever heard of the Lupercalia, in Roman times, they celebrate Romulus and Remus being fed by the she-wolf, Lupa. And so they have this kind of like she-wolf party. And interestingly, that is one of the parties, one of the festival days in the Book of Ceremonies. So again, it shows that kind of continuity. But as part of it, Lupercalia, there we go. Although interestingly, it sort of like had mutated quite a lot since the Roman days, basically. But it did show that they have that kind of continuity. But there was also a whole lot of new traditions that were added on and created at the same time. And again, that really got me thinking. It's kind of like, is a tradition the byproduct of a race and a culture, or is it intrinsic in its development, or is it a bit of both? And I always think it's kind of a bit of both. Traditions sort of come out of a people and a place and a culture, but at the same time they kind of reinforce it because it's made by that culture. It sort of resonates with those people because the ideas and aesthetic qualities that tradition has works for them. Although some of those traditions can resonate with other cultures, weirdly enough, as well, depending on who it is, although not all. So, for example, I mean, a good example of this is, for example, the pork pie as a traditional culture. If you ask any true Brit what they think of the pork pie, I'd say most of them would be positive about the pork pie. While if you were to bring it internationally, people will be like, "What is this monstrosity that you're bringing to me?" You know, that's tradition.
Which is partly if they know that it's a British food, there is international joy on destroying the British specifically. But even that aside, yes, I do get what you mean.
Yeah. Now, the second interesting example of something similar to this was in Meiji, Japan. Now, this is basically after, Japan sort of locked away itself for like a couple of 100 years until, thanks to the gunboat diplomacy of the Americans, they opened themselves up to the world again. And as part of that, they restored the emperor from the shogun, hence the Meiji Restoration. Now, the emperor wanted to become more Western and more like an actual global power. And so, as part of that, he adopted a whole load of Western traditions and forced his people to have them. So, for example, the kind of classic Japanese school outfits that you see in anime and stuff like that. Those are actually based on military outfits that the West had in 1880. So they basically imported a Western tradition.
So they have those kind of scarves.
Yes, like like this, like whatever the schoolgirls. So they sort of look like sailors. It's because it's literally sailor outfits.
Interesting.
And it's not just like there's tons.
There's an anime Sailor Moon, isn't there?
Yeah, exactly. So don't bring up Sailor Moon on the street.
I'm detracting points from your score because Sailor Moon was mentioned.
Exactly. Absolutely. You brought it up.
It doesn't matter. You're still losing points.
Fine. But what I think is interesting about those traditions is that the Japanese took them and they synthesized them. That is, they sort of, yes, they retained some of their Western qualities, but they also were brought in or seen through a different lens. And you could say the same thing about anime, which in itself is them taking Western cartoons like Mickey Mouse, etc., and then reimagining it for their own culture. So you can sort of import other traditions, but if they are to truly be adopted, they need to sort of be localized to that race and culture at the same time. You've got a cheeky grin. Have you got a picture to bring up or something? Is this?
No. I was sorry. No, but I was just pondering that. I thought that the westernization of Japan was all post World War II, but sounds like no.
Way before it. They again, all of the trains, lots of housing stuff. As part of check into even in the art world, the art's really interesting because there is a dialogue between Japan and the West at this period. Van Gogh, for example, he was obsessed with Hokusai's prints. He even did a painting of one of Hokusai's bridges. And basically a lot of the graphic artwork in terms of posters and that kind of graphic style is really derived from Japan, like the obsession with Orientalism and kind of Japanese woodblock prints. But here's the thing: where did the woodblock prints come from, Luke? They came from Dutch and Portuguese sailors who brought woodblock technology to Japan, coloured woodblock technology. So
what were the Japanese doing on the Axis side? I'm just realising how little I know about World War II here. Anyway.
Well, they were allied to Britain for a huge amount of period, and then for no good reason, we disallied with them and then allied with the Americans. It was basically the Americans sort of pushed us into it. But Peter Hitchens talks about this in a big way. So,
okay. I guess I need to go and read more Hitchens.
It's in the phony war. I just want to go back. I haven't really finished with this one because
keep going.
It's not a true revival. This is kind of imported external cultures or kind of like a gathering up. Can traditions be revived? I think just in the fact that if someone is doing something of the past, and if it goes through that synthetic process again, I think you have to resynthesize it for it to be authentic. You can't just kind of copy it exactly as it is. I think you have to do a reimagining for the present time, because I'm a big believer that races and cultures are not they're kind of like organic, like a tree. And again, just like Spengler says, there's a cyclical element to it as well. You need to reflect the time that you're in as part of what you believe. Again, if you look at all of our traditions, they're really not that old, like 100 and 150 years or something like that. We go through traditions very, very fast, and I think that's perfectly normal. It's a perfectly natural like lifestyle, because human life changes and we go through these different stages of who we are. So I think you can do it, but you'd need to recognize that we're not in the same place as where we once were. So, for example, if we were to to take back like Empire Day, for example, where we're kind of celebrating the glories of empire, it's kind of ridiculous because we're living in this post-empire world. We have none of the power that we had in the past. There's nothing for us to be proud of. So it's kind of like that's an authentic revival. While I think there's more interesting stuff turning back to like maybe some early Anglo-Saxon stuff where they were living in conflict. You know, like the pagan attacks or whatever, etc. They were Christians living in fear and in conflict. I think that's more interesting. So, for example, I think we should bring back some saints' days, for example, like St. Edmund. I'm a big fan of, and I think that I think the right saint portrayed in the right way, for example, would have genuine resonance with the English people today, for example, and you'd have to go through that synthetic process again. You can't just exactly copy it as is, but I think you could do it authentically. That is the end of my TED talk.
Good. Well, let's fight the Camazotz.
The Batman, as I like to call him.
Let's find out if you're Batman or Bat Food.
Oh, only 76. Surely this is a nice and easy one here. This is the
bad luck, Ferro.
This is the disaster.
Well, I highly recommend that you don't bring up any more degenerate anime for the rest of the.
That's the Sailor Moon curse.
It was the Sailor Moon curse that did you in. All right, so you head back, sadly, to Lambda's Landing, empty-handed. So here you are. A vast quantity of your time is gone, but you have 0 gold, so it's not looking good for you. But maybe if you stride on with heroic spirit, you could still recover this run. What do you reckon?
Yeah, let's go for knowledge. I think we've got a bit more time, so maybe I can get that gold again.
Yeah, okay. So knowledge is the East Crossroads. You head towards the East Crossroads, and who should come into your path but the risen dead?
Ooh.
A ragged moan. Oh, right.
So good. Wasted talent. Quit your job right now.
Make a ragged moan alerts you to danger. The zombie staggers towards you, pieces of its necrotic flesh sloughing off with each jerky movement.
Jerky movement. Brilliant.
Oh, all right. You've picked knowledge, so that's fun because this one is like a little mini quiz.
Okay.
So this is a bit of a change of pace. Okay, first question. Okay, this one, you should get this one. Who painted Starry Night? Now, I know it looks like it's multiple choice.
Van Gogh. Van Gogh.
Correct. Well done. You're not a Van Gogh pronouncer.
Oh, whatever. I just like the sound of Van Gogh more. I don't care the way you say it, and I don't care.
Well, I think it's Van Gogh or something, actually, isn't it? So
can I just say something about this? Can I just say something about this, Luke? Because
yes,
I really dislike people from other countries telling how you should pronounce names. For example, you know how like the Czech Republic were like, oh, you need to call us Czechia right now, and I'm like, you do not get to choose how what we call you. For example, like I want you to call us like Big Brain Land. That's what I want the entire world to call England Big Brain Land from now on.
It's a bit transcoded, isn't it?
Exactly.
You have to embrace their view of themselves.
It's just exceptionally annoying.
Yeah.
Or for example, like even worse is Turkey, where they were like, "Oh, can you do Turkey?" But it's got like the umlaut in it. So now all of a sudden we have to get the flipping umlaut out just because the Turkish
built our civilization on having like
no umlauts.
No umlauts.
It's incredibly annoying.
Been the main cause of our success is not having to bother putting little dots over letters. One dot over an I, and that's your lot.
Exactly. But to go back to Van Gogh, that Van Gogh is a legitimate saying because it's an anglicized way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's English people have found it easier to say Van Gogh than Van Gogh or etc.
Than Van Gogh.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. Now, I know this is probably a terribly trite observation, but I think it's the kind of maturity that can be extended to other arguments as a sort of start here, and then you can kind of become more enlightened on more topics. Which is, when do you use the local pronunciation for a city or a town? And the answer is you can't have a simple rule. Anybody who's claiming that it should always be the native pronunciation or that it should always be anglicized is oversimplifying things. You should just pick the right name for every place.
I just go for the aesthetic. I think like what sounds more beautiful. For example, Nuremberg. They call it Nuremberg, which I quite like. I just like Nuremberg.
What about
I like Hamburg rather than
Kiev versus Kiev?
Oh no, Kiev is way better than Kiev.
I suddenly noticed that it was amazing. Within about 24 hours, supermarkets started selling chicken Kiev. I don't know how they rushed that through production so quickly. But
because the government called up Sainsbury's and was like,
right,
yeah, we're going to do you in unless you change your Kievs right now.
Yeah, it was incredible. I was like, surely the factories are going to take more time to spin up a new chicken Kiev line, but they could do it overnight, apparently.
All the packaging's done locally, isn't it? And like all it is just updating a
just
design
change,
file.
send out a new PDF.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Next question. What is the only planet of our solar system that rotates clockwise?
That's a good question.
See, not so easy, this quiz, is it?
No, this is tough. This is a tough one. I am going to go... I'm going to go for one of the gas giants because I feel like they should be doing something different. So I'm just going to go Saturn.
No, it's Venus, I'm afraid.
Okay.
So I'll score that down. I will note that, and the repercussions will come as they may.
It will come down just like your curtains.
Yeah, that was it was a bit like the final scene in an Inspector Calls, wasn't it? The
exactly
dramatic moment. The whole set fell apart.
Exactly.
Last question. What element has the chemical symbol AU?
Silver, isn't it?
No, I'm afraid AU is gold. So
I thought AG was gold, but no, it's the other way around, is it? Argentinium, yeah, dang it.
So let's do battle against the undead, okay. But I wouldn't hold out too much hope. Right. Now, eagle-eyed viewers will notice that you got 94 for the discussion performance.
It was some good chat, though. I mean, the chat that I was doing in between was great. So
it was great, but unfortunately not good enough. So sadly, you're back to Lambda's Landing.
Such a loser.
Right. So you can go in any of the four directions. You could go back one of the ways you've already been.
We'll go to the biased bridge.
The biased bridge. Good choice.
Anything but ethics. Anything but ethics.
Right. Oh, and on your way to the biased bridge, would you believe it?
They should really get some security around here.
No, the island has been pumped full of enemies because the knights who go here are here to prove themselves.
Right, I see. Yes, yeah.
We've kind of in the world of the Gauntlet, the world has been rid of these dark spirits and ghouls, but they've all been collected up, a bit like a dark zoo, and it's used just for the Gauntlet games.
Can we create the Gauntlet Wiki, please? Start collecting some of this deep lore.
Yeah, it's unclear whether there is continuity between the universe of Gauntlet 2012 2024, Gauntlet the card game, and Gauntlet 2025.
This is part of what is it? This is kind of like Metal Gear Solid
Fans will
like timelines. Basically, this is it.
Yeah. There will be a MatPat video putting them all together at some point.
Exactly. I'm pitching this to Netflix. Actually, we're going to release it next year.
Yeah, the Gauntlet Netflix TV series is going to be, much hated by fans of the Gauntlet, but will be a kind of commercial success.
They've actually already
on the basis of the star power.
They've actually cast you as a fat black woman, Luke. So
I'm also doing all the sound effects. Speaking of which, a shower of glittering dust rains down. All right, here we go.
Come on.
It's kind of ASMR moment. A shower of glittering dust rains down as tiny winged beings dart around you. Their laughter both beautiful and unsettling.
Hold on a second. Luminous sprite, singular. That's what. And you're talking about sprites. Just a little note.
There's a bit of an editor's note coming in. All right. Sorry. So their laughter both beautiful and unsettling. Now I could do a beautiful and unsettling
Go on,
laugh, but I'd be worried about listeners would be up all night. They'd be unsettled by my laugh. So it's not.
How about this? I'll do it. That's it. That's what we're getting.
It was beautiful. It was certainly beautiful. A tear came to my eye. Exactly. Okay. Let's do this one. Do individual rights supersede collective needs?
The individual rights supersede collective needs.
What I should do is put the question up while we're doing our little kind of skit related to the monster, so you can think about it. I want to have
the banter. I know. I want to have the banter.
Well, I'll tell you the real secret. Whilst that skit is going on, I am furiously pressing buttons behind the scenes and trying to pick a question, so it's not possible.
The large lever. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to sort of cop out here and say that again, it's essentially a contextual thing, isn't it? Really. So, for example, I'm trying to think of an example I can think of where the individual rights supersedes the collective needs. Certainly in terms of like property ownership and land, etc. I feel like the collective thing to do would be to have everything in common. Although there's interesting things here where I feel like the strong individual rights sometimes tie into collective rights as well.
Okay.
And I think, for example, with the land in common, I think we have attempted several times societarily to create those kinds of societies, and they haven't worked out for various reasons, be it corruption or laziness of certain individuals in those kind of circumstances. So I think, for example, that even the notion of property ownership, which is an individual right, helps the collective at the same time. So I don't think they're necessarily mutually exclusive. I'm in general more of a romantic collectivist, I would say, than an individualist. I think a lot of people are probably more like that these days, having lived through a very intense period of individualism.
Well, I agree that we've maybe shifted our kind of stated opinion about individualism. I guess there was a period, maybe most exemplified by the boomers,
yes,
of loud and proud individualism. But in practice, I don't see people doing very much to undermine the individualist. I think people are, if anything, still trending towards individualism. People are more isolated and more islands, or at least attempting to be more isolated and lonely than ever.
It's a very postmodern take. I think you're probably true, and I think we are. I was thinking this about fashion, for example, where yes, I think a lot of people I think people were way better dressed in the past, but at the same time, the restrictions on what you could wear were huge, both in terms of like what's like socially acceptable. So, for example, if you see all of the kind of working class guys, there is almost zero difference in their outfit. It's like waistcoat, like maybe your hat. The hat is the one area of like it's a hat individualism. But even the collar and cuff of the shirts are essentially the same.
Yeah.
Could I go back to a society where you have that kind of imposed collectivism but then again, I think it goes back to this the individual versus collective and
I was watching Conclave, and I'm making a purely aesthetic
potpourri, Luke. So
comment on this
right
film.
now. Go
on. And they've got some quite striking shots in that film. I think they're probably all in the trailer, where you see all of the characters moving across the frame dressed identically, or maybe they've all got the same umbrella, things like this. And it just struck me how much amazing beauty is brought into the world by uniform. We kind of think of uniforms either as being a kind of military or a scholastic thing. But I think if everybody's like forced to wear exactly the same color as each other, it's stunning. The effect is remarkable. So I was kind of just mourning the fact that now that everybody's been allowed to pick literally any color, you know, we've reached the point where you can manufacture clothing to just a random RGB value, and people just buy it because there's not even any, like, I don't think realistically any colors are in or out anymore. People are just like, that'll do, that color. And the effect is when you see a collection of people, it just looks like vomit. Like humanity has become like, you know, vomit across the landscape.
There's a whole lot of interesting stuff off the back of that. I want to talk about the uniform thing for a second, because it wasn't just military soldiers that would have that kind of uniform look. For example, if you look at the Venetian Republic, they arranged their oligarchies by colors. So you had the Black Council and then the Red Council. And then basically these were different, like, high-ranking families that were selected, who would then make rulings and judgments on things or be brought into various councils. I got to say that the Venetian Republic's selection system was like totally weird. There was about 6 different ballots. It's like a weird ballot system, and they just kept going into more and more ballots, basically. But if you just Google maybe like Venetian, like red council, like velvet, something like that, and have a look at, because it's a pretty sweet outfit. Because they would wear these kind of like large velvet. They sort of look like a. Imagine you going down to for your bathing or something like that, and you've put like a towel on your shoulder. It looks like, I don't know if I can. If you've managed to find a picture.
Well, I don't know if this is the right thing.
Yes, I mean it looks a little bit like that. Oh yeah, can you see on his shoulder there? That's actually not part of his outfit. That's like a piece of velvet. So he's part of the Black Council. And they would all wear this kind of same uniform, but again, the color denotes how high they are in the Republic. And then also in Tudor times, depending on how high up in society you would be able to wear different colored outfits. So, for example, orange would be the preserve of knights or above. If you were a prince or a princess, you could wear a brocade and stuff like that. So there was much more uniformity in terms of stylistic look based on your hierarchy, which again, I think, like going back to your point of as individualism, there's your conclave, has individualism like lost something? And I think the answer is yes. Like just because we have access to every color, doesn't mean that we should be using every single color. And again, I think it's that there's interesting discussions about taste and sensuousness. So for example, who's the guy that can work out what the best wine is? It's a sommelier. It's a man who has extra smelling abilities and taste abilities over other human beings, right? So we turn to him because his taste senses are better. But the point is that this idea that of certain individuals with better senses and better taste, shouldn't you put those people in charge of making aesthetic decisions, basically?
I think this is the real conclave. So I feel we should give the Catholics some credit. The movie Conclave is basically just stealing credit for the work of real Catholic designers. So there you are.
There you go.
Looks stunning. But you could imagine one of the celebrities turning up to the Met Gala dressed like this.
That is, I mean, but the effect of
the effect of one person dressed like this when everyone else is wearing different, weird, non-matching things is like nothing. Whereas seeing these guys all matching each other, like say what you want about the Catholic Church, it's pretty cool to be part of a gang all dressed the same color. There's just something primal to me that's like appealing about. So
look at all of the lace. Look at that rank individualism. Everyone wearing their own little.
Although they've got, I don't think this is it individualism because they've got the two lace guys here.
No.
It's
not.
When you look closely, it does look a bit like each of them has grabbed the cover off their wife's
not a fan
side table, just wrapped it around their waist. Well, all right. What about these guys?
The Swiss Guard are cool. Yeah,
that's kind of cool. Anyway, right. Individualism. All I'm saying is that I don't think it's a real human impulse to be an individual. I think that's manufactured. I think people, when they're in the natural state, look for something to seek to. They aspire to belong to a group. They want to see something where they can look at a large group of people that's exclusive, that they can, work towards and be in that group. So yes, individualism has been foisted upon us. That's my argument. Let's get back to
I would say. I think one interesting thing about individualism is how it's tied to creativity at the same time. And again, I think one national characteristic, like racial, cultural, of the English and the British is our capacity for imagination. Again, the philosopher who I will not name talks about the
ding,
Gothic.
Ding, ding.
Exactly, you can hit the bell. Talks about the Gothic imagination, which is this deranged imagination that comes out of like Northern Germanic sensibilities, basically. And again, if you look at the whole of Romanticism in general, there's a big focus on imagination and novelty at the same time. Is there any connection between this imaginary capacity and the fact that whatever the majority of inventions came out of, whatever was it the blue banana or whatever, that small area of patch, which is like us, the Dutch, northern France and Italy or whatever, is like 90%. And I do think that creativity is tied into individualism, but it always I don't think it's for everyone, if that makes sense. I think we've ended up. Oh, there you go. There's the blue banana. I think this is like 90% of all inventions come from this area, which are Germanic people, basically. And I think that is tied into this this imagination capacity that we have, which is like a physical mental thing. I think that different people across the world have different imagination abilities, or they imagine in different ways. So I think individualism is important for that. And actually, this is also a religious thing as well, because I think that Protestantism is the most individualistic form of Christianity. People often think about the denominational splits as this kind of great historic thing, but I think it's tied to like grace and imagination and how we think of ourselves as people, as much as these kind of political barriers. If you look at where Protestantism formed, it's in all of the Germanic places. It's whatever, Sweden, Germany, England to a degree, etc. Scotland. So maybe there's a connection there. So I feel like this is country specific, and I think we are one of the most individualistic countries, but we have gone too far, like you said. I think out of all of the races of the world, the English are one of the most individualistic. Again, like China's, again, compare it to China. The Chinese are naturally collective, and they think in that kind of way. When I was at university with a high Chinese percentage count because it was an engineering university. And what they would do is they would send one of their little group to take lecture notes, and it would be a different little dweeb each time. And that dweeb would teach all the other guys in Chinese what he learnt in that lesson, which blew my mind as a way of learning. And we would never do that. We'd just think that's kind of cheating or something like that. But they didn't have any problem with it whatsoever.
I have to admit that maybe computer scientists are naturally a bit hippie-ish, but we had shared lecture notes. We had a we had a big Google Doc repository, and everyone was collectively taking notes on the lecture all together as the lecture was happening. It was like 5 or 6 people typing at once into this single shared study notes. But then as the course went on, then it became less and less necessary for people to go to the lectures, because the lecturer could not claim that there was any content that was only in the lectures and not in the notes, because we would have almost a verbatim copy of every single word that the lecturer had said. So there occasionally was like one person in the lecture taking notes, a lecture that was meant to have 30 people in it, and there was just one person. And then at some point we started realizing that there were missing lectures in Google Docs where nobody had gone.
Brilliant.
So that fell apart a bit. Good. Well, I was going to give one other thought, which was that this question is kind of biasing the answer, because I think rights are completely made up and needs actually exist. So if the question had been, do individual needs supersede collective rights, then the answer would be yes.
The other way around,
yeah. Good. Well, because that was an exemplary answer, I'm going to stick a bit more gold in the pot that you can win, but only if you can beat the luminous sprite in battle. So
okay, let's see what happens.
Are you ready to take on the sprite?
I'm feeling positive.
Outcome is being determined. using the latest technology.
Oh, but it's a tough monster here. This is going to be... I'm feeling good. Oh, victory.
Well done.
Brilliant.
Okay, you've got 97 gold. Let's go back to the map. That means that you've reached... Let me move the map across. You've reached the biased bridge. So you can carry on to the time pools. You could carry on to the paradox plains, or you can head back to Lambda's Landing and bank your 97 gold. So it's organization or identity, or head back.
I'll do one more, Luke, because I've got to go in a second. So I'll go for identity. I'm gonna double down. Let's see what I can do.
All right. You begin your journey outwards, but unfortunately,
oh my goodness,
would you believe it?
Surprise!
The Leviathan springs, uncoils in your path, scales gleaming like wet metal in the half-light.
Did you use this descriptions, or did you use AI to do those for you?
I have to admit, having used AI for the descriptions.
I was like, that's some nice descriptions, but then I'll take it back.
I'm glad you checked, because you almost gave a compliment to sort of...
I sense that that's the kind of thing. I was like, oh, that's the kind of thing that Luke would do. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I had very little time to prepare this. People watching are probably thinking that I, had 6 months off work to prep for the Gauntlet. But no, in fact, I very much had to cobble it together whilst trying to do 10 other things in my life. The real clue for the fact that AI was involved is that there's a lot of gender neutral language. These monsters are often described as, yeah.
So,
what aspects
that makes sense? They are monsters after all. So,
I think some of the monsters may reproduce asexually, but
exactly,
that's pretty well. What aspects of your identity are most important to you?
This isn't what I came here for. This is it's turned into a therapy session now, Luke.
Yeah,
I'm lying down on the couch. Yeah.
Look, if you're going to win at the Gauntlet, you have to embrace the twists and turns.
Okay. What aspects of your identity? What do we mean by aspects again? This is. I'm going to finish.
What do you mean by what? What do you mean by
what? Aspects of identity.
Well,
I'm going to change this, and then I'm going to say, what do I think in general should people be thinking about? It's important for them, which I have tried to do myself, but I have failed on a day-to-day basis, and unsurprisingly, I'll say that the religious path is is an exceptionally important aspect of my life, and also, but I consider
you don't have to sound embarrassed and bashful about that. So you do realize that half the questions I ask people are about religion here. So you're on friendly terms to discuss.
Yes, no, exactly. It's just more just obvious. But
it's more obvious, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're always trying to find the kind of the left field answer. I feel like that's what's paining you here is having to be honest.
It's the eternal hipsterdom that I am.
Yes, exactly.
This is why I'm quite like AA, because we are eternally like looking for searching for that novelty and
yes.
No. I wouldn't describe myself as I'm a very anti cynicism. I'm a very earnest person, I would say, but I do love finding things other people haven't found, or finding hidden knowledge that's been lost. That's part of my personality. I guess I haven't really thought of it in the religious sense, in that kind of spiritual sense, though. But more kind of like, I do like the path that is not well tread.
Yes, I mean, I chime with that, and I will say when I'm in church and do you know what I mean? When it gets to that point in the sermon where you can tell that the preacher is kind of gearing up for their gospel presentation. Yeah. It's like whatever they've been talking about, maybe they've been doing a really interesting deep dive into Babylonian culture or something, but they've kind of hit the point in their notes where it just probably says like connect it back to the cross, and they're just gonna like riff for 5 minutes on stuff that you've heard a million times. There's a bit of me which does kind of want to switch off, because I'm like, oh, come on, what I really enjoy is new information, stuff that I haven't heard before. And then people will say, and I think they are correct, even though part of me rebels against it, that you should never tire of the basics as a Christian, that actually maybe there is some pride involved in feeling like you're kind of beyond the simple bits of Christianity, and you're like, you know, I don't get to I don't get to stretch as an advanced Christian TM, you know. Oh, here I am retreading stuff that I knew when I was 5 years old. But we are, you know, there is an aspect, I think, of right religious thinking which is meditative and is more about going more deeply into thinking about the same idea rather than going more deeply by thinking of like different ideas.
Yeah, I mean, it's the eternal thing about novelty versus repetition, and trying to embrace both of those formats in your life, because again, I think there's something interesting aesthetically here, which is the 20th century artistically has been dominated by novelty or novel forms, especially since the kind of 50s and 60s. And for example, the whole thing about postmodernism, or like one aspect is experimentation. What is experimentation? It is the hunt for the new, and eclecticism at the same time. So we've come out of this very individual time. We've come out of this very novel time. So again, I think there is a natural point to want to kind of rebel against that, against the time of our forefathers, and into the repetition mode. I mean, in terms of repetition, I do
having
always
forefathers is an extremely modern thing.
I think repetition is very interesting for me, especially biblically, because that I always pick up on something new from a Bible verse. You know, you can read it 100 times, and I'll have forgotten something, or there's a little detail, and I think that's the joy of repetition, is having that kind of depth to a passage, or reading between the lines a little bit. So that's why I never really I don't get tired of the okay. Apart
I was
from
just going to challenge you, right? This is the most oft quoted, the most popular.
Yeah, I mean, I should talk. I'm talking like actual passages, as opposed to
the full chapter. You think at this point there's nothing more to be learned from that verse?
I think the problem this has is it's kind of like become like a slogan, and it's one of those things that is said so much in Christian circles, it means nothing to anyone else. This is interesting in the context of this again. So again, and Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, and even so, Son of Man must be lifted up. So again, I always forget about that's a great Old Testament story, where again Moses had to. I mean, it's almost kind of a little bit pagan. Had to create a bronze effigy of a snake, and he had to hold that bad boy up while the Israelites were fighting an army, and his arms were tired. And
wasn't it that they had to look at the snake and then they wouldn't die from poison or something? Oh, maybe it's the battling as well. You might be right. Anyway, yes. Sorry, carry on. I interrupted.
Maybe there's multiple serpents, but I think the lifting
maybe
up
it got reused. I think there's definitely Moses holding up his arms or a staff or something during a battle, and they were succeeding as long as it was being held up. But yes, sorry, carry on. The point you were making was that the verse itself, in its context, is more. It gains extra interest, extra context. There's new layers to rereading it because it's the for at the beginning of it, for God so loved the world, is like, remember the Moses lifting up the serpent, the Son of Man must be lifted up. They're connected. Why are they connected? Because in the same way as the snake saved people in the Old Testament, so Jesus saves people today. So if you're reading the verse in context, you're immediately making the connection to the snake. If you're reading it on somebody's wristband, there's no way you're going to be making that connection.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I think it's going back to that parable thing. How could no one else understand it? Well, actually, it's kind of it's almost become sort of like Christianese. It's almost like a language and a symbol as opposed to words which people understand. And I'm not asking for. I don't think sort of translating it into some kind of cool hip vernacular is what I'm asking for. But do you know what I'm saying? I think it's lost its potency. And again, I'm also of a believer that evangelism it depends at the time, and the evangelism of the time of just after Christ is very miracle heavy. If you go to Acts, it's Paul is healing the sick and he's healing all of the sick in the area around him, because what was needed at that time, well, they were those people were very spiritual people, they're very faithful people, and I'm sure their faith is would blow us away today. Their power of belief compared to our very non-believing time today. So again, ours is not the time of miracles, but I think
evangelism today is very gauntlet based.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm saying. or again, I think maybe something around
evangelism today is based. You could just cut out the word entirely. I think if people start saying evangelism is based, then both the term evangelism and the term based will immediately become uncool.
No, you'll get some kind of you can't say that about Christianity. You'll get a whole lot of miserable bishops about it in some Christian.
I think the word based is right on the precipice of becoming mainstream.
It's already done. It already is. I've seen several pop stars say it.
Here's a fun piece of Lambda history for those who've been around from the start will know this.
Add it to the wiki.
But my channel, the first YouTube channel I made, was called Based Bible Studies, at a time when that was really edgy and cool. And I renamed it pretty quickly because I realized how faddish the word based was going to be. And it was going to seem really, really uncool if I stuck with it for too long. But there is something I miss about the alliteration, if nothing else.
I don't think it's too cringy. Anyway, I don't even know how we got to this. I think. Well,
you were sort of.
I want to say one last thing, and that is, I often think of how they used to call Christianity the way, and I feel like that is just a way better, excuse the pun, way of thinking about how to live a religious life. That it's this kind of moving. It's a moving forward. It's a type of life. It's a journey at the same time.
Maybe we could call our men's group Protein and the Way.
Way terrible. That was absolutely. If you're for the gym, muscular.
Yeah, it would be spelled WHEY.
Yeah, exactly. That's the supplement. You're flogging everyone. I like it. So anyway, that's me.
Okay, good. Well, shall we do battle with Leviathan?
Go on.
I think we can we can view this battle. Not only is your 97 gold in limbo here, but in the balance is also your identity, your faith, it's all
Am
on
I
the line.
faithful enough? Yeah.
Yeah. So let's find out.
$75, easy. How's the Leviathan weaker than a sprite?
Oh,
terrible.
Unfortunate.
But in some ways, this shows the daily failures that we have as Christians, and the need for repentance and earnest resetting of our lives.
Well, here you are back at Lambda's Landing. Your time is up, and you are in a sort of almost Hindu way. you're regenerated back to the initial conditions. The entire journey has been for naught.
In my beginning is my end.
Clearly at the bottom of the leaderboard as a result.
As I should be, exactly. Right at the top.
Depending on how you measure it, yes. The Ferro, the humble. I guess we've also answered the question about gnomes.
They're no good as warriors. Sad.
Well, thank you for joining me, Ferro.
No, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much, Luke.